Welcome. We're about to jump into a huge question, one that people have been asking for a really, really long time. How exactly do you define a Christian? But here's the twist. We're not going to look at modern takes or cultural ideas. Nope. We're going straight to the source, to the foundational texts themselves. Our whole goal here is to build this definition using only that material as our blueprint. All right, let's get into it. Everything we're about to unpack, it all really boils down to this one question right here. According to the New Testament, the whole journey to figuring out what it means to be a follower doesn't start with a list of rules or some kind of ceremony. It starts with an answer to this very direct, very personal question about identity. So that's where we'll begin. This first part is all about that decisive question. Before we talk about actions or behaviors or anything else, the text makes one thing crystal clear. The starting point is a personal declaration about who Jesus is. And just look at how this is framed. Jesus first asks his followers, hey, what's the word on the street? What are people saying about me? He's kind of gauging the public opinion, the rumors. But it's all a setup, because what he's really getting at is, what do you believe? He's putting personal conviction front and center. And there it is. That's the answer, the one the text holds up as the correct one. And it's not just some casual agreement, right? This is a huge declaration. According to the story, this specific confession that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God, this becomes the absolute bedrock of Christian identity. And here's the kicker. Look at how this belief gets validated. Jesus' response basically says, you didn't figure this out on your own. This wasn't just a good guess. The text presents Peter's answer as a divine revelation, something given by God, not thought up by a person. And that takes it from being just an opinion to being a foundational truth. Okay, so let's see how this builds. If that declaration is the cornerstone, then what's the internal thing that makes it all work? Well, the texts call it faith. So in this next part, we're going to dig into what faith actually is and what it's supposed to accomplish for a believer. This is probably one of the most direct definitions you'll find in the whole New Testament. Let's break it down real quick. Substance of things hoped for. That sounds like a real solid conviction, right? And evidence of things not seen. That means it's a kind of proof that works beyond what you can see or touch. It's this deep-seated trust in a reality that isn't physically there. So what does this faith actually do? Well, this verse connects the dots perfectly. The act of believing is tied directly to a very specific result, the remission of sins, or, forgiveness. And this isn't some minor perk. The texts present it as one of the main things that happens when you put your faith in who Jesus is. This leads us to a really important idea, justification. All that word really means is being made right with God. And according to this verse, you don't get there by doing a bunch of good deeds. It's achieved through faith. It's this justification that the text says brings back that peace with God. This slide lays it out so clearly and sets up what's coming next. See, on the left, you've got the internal foundation, faith, belief, leading to everlasting life. Then on the right, you've got the external expression of that belief, your actions. Anything you do for other people is seen as something you're doing for Christ himself. The two are completely linked. Exactly. So if faith is the engine inside, then good works are the car actually moving down the road. This next section is all about that outward proof. It's not enough to just believe something in your head. It's about how that belief completely changes the way you live your life. You might know this story, the one about the rich young ruler. He comes up and asks a very direct question. What do I have to do to get eternal life? And Jesus' first answer isn't some deep abstract philosophy. He points straight to the established moral law, the commandments. So right away, a baseline of moral behavior is set as a key part of the path. And these are the specific ones he lists. Pretty foundational stuff for a good society, right? Notice that most of them are don't do this. They're like the guardrails for your behavior. Following these is presented as the absolute starting point for a life of good works. But it doesn't stop there. The definition gets bigger pretty quickly. It moves from just avoiding bad things to actively doing good things. It's a huge shift from passive obedience to active, compassionate service. This is where that external expression of faith really starts to shine. And this list, you can't get much more concrete than this. These aren't just vague ideas. They are real, tangible, actionable things you can do to help other people. And in the context of this chapter, doing these things is shown as direct evidence of your genuine faith. And this path of action isn't just about what you do for others. It's also about what's going on inside you. This shows that works also means building a certain mindset, one of joy, prayer, thankfulness, and discernment. It's about getting your entire self, your actions, your thoughts, your spirit, all lined up with your faith. Which brings us to our last section, the big why. Why do all this? Why go on this journey of faith and works? What's the end game? What is the ultimate goal that, according to the texts, drives this whole thing? We're coming back to this question one last time because it just frames the whole purpose so perfectly. The goal isn't money or status here on earth. No, the pursuit is for something called eternal life. That's the prize, the promised inheritance at the end of the road. But what's so fascinating is how eternal life is actually defined here. It's not just about living forever and ever. According to this verse, eternal life is knowing God and Jesus Christ. That completely changes it from just being about endless time to being about a deep, intimate relationship. And to wrap it all up, this isn't presented as a maybe or a possibility. It's called a promise. The text describes eternal life as something that God, who is described as being unable to lie, promised from the very beginning. That promise is the ultimate fuel and motivation for the whole journey. So let's just quickly recap. When we trace the definition of a Christian through these texts, we see a clear path. It all starts with a decisive answer about Jesus' identity. That answer is built on an internal foundation of faith. That faith is then expressed through external actions and good works. And the whole thing is driven by the purpose of receiving the promise of eternal life. And that's our look at the source material. We've built the definition piece by piece from the ground up. So the final question, the one we'll leave with you, is this. In our world today, which is so different from the one these texts were written in, what does this ancient, source-based definition actually mean? It's something to think about.